Explorations presents Amateur Hour.
Hey everybody, welcome to Explorations. It's Rob, Damian, and Ian with you, and tonight we are talking about scuba diving. This is something that Ian and I definitely are very much interested in, and something that we're trying to convince Damian to be interested in, although it's a bit of an uphill battle. But yes, we are talking about scuba diving. In terms of amateurness, Damien is definitely the amateur. I have a little bit of experience with it. I have my open water certification, and Ian is much more certified. And I don't even know what certifications you have, Ian. Obviously,
I
open
have my
water, but
open, yeah, I have my open water, my advanced, and then my rec diving
oh,
as well.
fancy. So there you have it.
Yeah.
Semi, no, expert's a strong word. Most knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable. This guy,
Zero
getting
knowledgeable.
on board.
I saw Finding Nemo once. It was pretty good.
Yeah, so imagine being able to like float around and hang out with Nemo.
Yeah,
Disaster.
yeah.
So
There's a lot of fish down there.
yeah, man, for sure.
And sharks.
Why don't we Ian and I start out talking about why we like scuba diving and what the draw is. Try to convince Damien to get on board here.
Yeah, sell me on it,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, you go first, Ian. You do your spiel and I'll do mine.
Um, Selling Damian, that's going to be hard. But what I like about scuba diving is just another completely different world than what we're used to on the land. We see snow. We're familiar with snow. We see trees and rocks and all that. And like the creatures up on the land we're more familiar with because, well, we walk on it. We see it. We go out camping. We see bears and lions and tigers. Probably not the latter two, but at least bears in Ontario. But then when you go underwater, it really is a whole new experience. Um, all the mammals and critters and creatures are completely different. You're like suspended in buoyancy, neutral buoyancy. You can just hover and observe life. It's like feeling of that suspension and neutral buoyancy is just amazing. The sounds are very different. Of course, you can't smell anything. If you do, you probably die or
Got bigger
something.
issues.
Yeah, you got bigger issues if you can smell things underwater. Well, admittedly, if you have just the mask and the regulator, but it's a very different world. Even the colors are different as you go down in depth. Like the red wavelengths start disappearing, and so things look different as well. You can hear like the shrimp and the just
Yeah.
like at the bottom of the ocean. It just looks it's so cool to hear the octopuses that come through, the turtles. These are all like the hand signs for and sharks, like dolphin.
Biting
It's pretty,
fish.
yes, that's right. They're like
Looking
it's
for the hit
really
right.
cool. It's just a very different world underneath the ocean for that. I'll start rambling there, Rob. Why'd you get into diving?
So yeah, I got my open water over 20 years ago now. But there's been a lull, let's say, in the amount of diving I've done in the last 10 years with having kids. Sort of has an impact on that. As has an impact on a lot of activities, but diving was definitely one of them. But yeah, I have a good chunk of dives under my belt. But what really draws me to it is two big things. The first thing is, Ian, you touched on it a bit, is like the exploration part of it. Like you're seeing part of the world that everyone or a lot of people see up on top, but just a little bit below the surface is somewhere that like hardly anyone is going to get to look at, right? Only scuba divers or people who are maybe like snorkeling if the water's shallow, but like just 10, 20 feet down like is a whole world that most of the population is never going to see, and there could be some really cool stuff down there. You got to go down and find out, right? And the other big thing is I kind of liken it like your movement through the water to flying. It's the closest I feel we can get to actually being able to fly. So I have a couple of pretty big memories of like, you come down the gentle sloping hill, like hovering above the top, and then you come to this giant cliff, and then you dive bomb straight down the cliff, right? Or
Yeah.
like gliding through like these massive coral columns. Like it's
Yeah.
just an experience you can't replicate on land. Like
Yeah.
skydiving, wingsuiting, like you're still falling.
Yeah.
So it's a wild experience. Yeah, so we talked about a couple certifications, open water, advanced, rec. Do you want to talk a little bit about those? Let's get people like where you start. Why don't we start with where you start with diving?
Yeah. Sure. Uh, I mean, if you don't want to hop right into it, there is try a dive, which I've been trying to convince
Yeah.
Damian to do, rather quite unsuccessfully. And then after you get your open water, you could go into a whole bunch of different specialties as well. In the advanced open water, you have 5 adventure dives you can choose from, and I forget exactly all the various types. I think there's a dozen dives you can do, but the um, compulsory courses you have to do is a night dive, deep dive, nav, and then buoyancy, and then one other. I don't quite remember what it is. At the wreck diving I have is is something I wanted to get into, to like get into cave diving as well. And
Oh.
so at this point, you have a guideline that carries you, and you have to learn how to tie it. You have to learn the nav with the compass on your watch. And the thing about like wreck diving too is if you're going through corridors of a sunken ship too, the ship could be like this. So if you start up here, you could be at like 10 meters, but you could be 40 meters down here. So that's pretty bad. You should probably start like 30 meters and work your way up.
And you don't
Um,
realize it too because you're going down what looks like a hole. That's what makes wreck diving dangerous. Is it's
oh,
disorienting because things that you're used to being flat and level aren't. And ships
yes,
ships are big.
Yeah, and I
very.
guess like so as an amateur who's never done it before, right? Like, do you have a sense of up, down, left, and right when you're down there, or is it purely based off of like I can see a thing, and that's what tells me because you're trying to get perfectly buoyant, right? Like that's the idea. So if you're upside down, do you even know?
you you
Can you
you
can you
can
get
get
turned around and
disoriented
stuff?
pretty easily, yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. I
And
bet.
people that's one of the dangers is people will tend to panic, but a good way to figure yourself out is to look where your bubbles are going.
Hmm. You guys keep talking about darkness, and so like deep diving is dark, night is dark. Let's go to the lakes, they're dark. So I gotta wonder, right? Like to me, when I'm watching videos or movies about scuba diving, certainly the most interesting thing is what you can see, right? So like when we talk about like the darkness, like is it really just everything's pitch black for a lot of these times except for where you point a flashlight? Like it that's kind of the picture I'm being painted right now, which
No.
is terrifying again, just so we're clear.
In
Yeah.
in the tropics, for example, which is where I've done
Yeah,
all my saltwater diving, at 100 feet, like you can see fine. You
cool.
have a huge visibility. At that depth, everything is kind of blue because there's no red light getting down. But other than that, you can see no issues. Whereas in like a freshwater lake, once you get below like 30 feet, maybe 40 feet, depending on how much algae there is, like it could be pitch black. It
Really?
just depends
Wow.
on the body of water. Like they're all different.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
Agreed.
there's also a saying that everything, all the really cool stuff you want to see in terms of like fish and coral and stuff is all at 30 feet anyways, where there's plenty of light.
Yeah.
So for the
Like
most
the
part, 10 meters, 30 feet is where you're going to be hanging out, and light's not an issue there.
yeah,
Awesome.
definitely. The first time I did use a flashlight was nighttime diving in the tropical areas. Um, when I went wreck diving, yeah, I didn't have a flashlight either, because the portholes in the ship was still big enough for the light to come through, even though I was down around 25 meters. But like, if it was going toward like dusk, yeah, that probably would have warranted a flashlight. But for the most part, you really don't. If you're in the tropics, I think the only freshwater diving I've done was with you, Rob,
In
up in
Tobermory?
Tobermory, Ontario.
Yeah, and actually, I was just thinking about that. Even in Tobermory, at 10 meters, 30 feet, it's still pretty bright because that's what makes Tobermory awesome. It's really really clear water.
Yeah.
So again, lake dependent, and we were
Sweet.
not proper wreck diving. We were diving on wrecks. They weren't. You couldn't go inside them, but we didn't have flashlights for that. For people interested in starting, what would you say the first steps are? Talk to a local dive shop, get your open water cert.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't think I've been very successful in convincing people to dive. One for like 100%, one for one, Damian, I haven't been able to get out. So, I don't know, Damian, what do you need to feel comfortable going in?
So that like try a dive thing was probably the best I'd heard of something to
Yeah,
motivate me to give it a whirl. Because honestly, it's just a super intimidating idea for me to do it, right? So having someone literally like either tethered to me or like a hawk on top of me the whole time really does make me feel more comfortable. Um, Outside of that, what would make me really okay with doing it is I think if we're in a tropical place, like I've never been to anywhere tropical, right? Like where we're talking about these like 100 feet of like visibility, that's insanity to me.
Yeah.
Like I've swam in some pretty clear lakes. Glacier lakes are really clear, but they're not like 100 feet. Like that's nuts. So yeah, that would be cool. I think that would be the thing. If it was the right time in the right place and I was in like a tropical environment, great. I would consider it a little bit more. Um, if there was a dude literally beside me the whole time, and dudette, just so we're clear, both. But if they were beside me the whole time, that would make me feel more comfortable. I just like for me personally, like growing up in Canada, the only bodies of water I've ever been in have been like completely pitch black anytime I look anywhere when I'm in them. So like it's just like cool. That doesn't make me want to do this. Like this seems like a bad idea.
Your eyes do adjust, so they end up not
Yeah,
being completely pitch black, but I mean, they are pretty dark for the most part. Yeah.
yeah,
that's fair.
So personally, my suggestion to people who are interested in it is if you have the option to go somewhere tropical and do like an all-inclusive resort or some sort of hotel stay or something, somewhere like Jamaica, Mexico, one of the islands, I recommend doing it there. The cost savings is not going to be huge, but they will throw in like your open water certification, and then they throw in like a couple extra dives too. So you're basically getting your lessons, your certification, and a couple free dives.
Awesome.
So, at least in my experience, that's what I've seen. But that's my recommendation. But I mean, if you can't go south to do it, there's plenty of places all over that are more than happy to do it. And most of the dive shops I've dealt with, everyone's very amicable and very welcoming to new people. Everyone
And I gotta
is looking
ask,
to expand
like,
the
so
sport. So
we're talking about like now flying to a place to get a discounted rate, right? So which brings me to the idea of like, geez, how expensive is this to get started on, right? Because like,
yeah.
what are we
yeah.
talking as like if open water is where we want to start? What did you guys pay for it? What does it take to do that one first trip or whatever it does?
So your open water course, it will be everything from start to finish to get you certified. So there's a certain number of hours in class, like sit down
Yeah,
in class, and then there's a certain number of hours in the pool,
yeah,
and then there's open water dives, a couple dives you have to do, and you have to do certain things during those dives to get your certification.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
cost now, I have no idea, man.
Uh, when I did it 10 years ago, like I want to say $200 to $300
Yeah,
in
that
Indonesia.
sounds right. I think I paid a
Yeah.
couple $100 like 20 plus years ago.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm
So that,
sure you're looking at least 300 now. But it does
yeah.
Yeah.
include 2 dives. Like they're still proper dives
Yeah.
from a boat usually. So
And
Yeah.
that's not, honestly, that's not that bad. Like I was worried it would be like $1,000 or something like that. So
No.
that's a lot
yeah,
nicer.
So I know like Canada diving here, you need a lot more neoprene, so the
your
costs
wetsuit.
start going up from there.
Yeah.
So the barrier to entry is pretty high, unfortunately. Now, admittedly, like in the past couple of this year, the past couple of months, when Rob, you've been trying to organize with me, trying to get out. Sorry for not being able to get out. I've
Oh,
been
you've been
finding
busy.
the rentals and for the full weekend like $300 to rent everything,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I
and
think
it's
renting equipment to use on your own is not a great approach. The dive shops want you to go out on their charters.
yeah,
So you'll get a cheaper rate to use your equipment for the day, and they'll take you to like 2 sites out on their boat. And if
yeah,
you don't own your equipment, I think that's the approach you want to take to be a little more financially conservative, if that's a good way to put it.
yeah.
Otherwise, you're
Well,
looking pricey.
Effective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, and you guys are pretty experienced and you don't own gear, right? Like that's pretty rare, I'd say,
I
for
have a
for
full
most
set.
hobbies. Oh, you
Yeah,
do.
I
Okay.
got, I got my gear. But
Okay.
I've been accruing it over 20 plus years, right? Like,
Right. And
which is
you mentioned
cool.
something that was pretty interesting to me. Talking about like going into deep dives, and you're like, now it's going to take you 2 hours to get up. That's not really something I have any knowledge about, but like certainly another fear I could say I have is being panicked and being like, I can't leave, or I would leave too quick. And I know about the bends, but uh, but what kind of like pace is required to do this, right? Like let's say for open water, because that's the more basic one, but um, how does that work? Like if you're down at the limits of open water, do you have to like take your time? And even if you're like bitten by a shark, you just gotta chill and like hang out. Like what's the deal with
I
that?
no. Most of the time with your open water, you're never going to be somewhere where you're going to injure yourself going up too quickly.
Okay.
Correct.
A lot when you go out with dive masters, they'll do what's called I think they're calling it like a safety stop at 20 feet or whatever, where you hang out for 5 minutes. Which it's a good thing to do in practice, but in an emergency, it's not going to impact you to go all the way up.
Cool.
Yeah,
So that
Yeah,
that whole like the bends and all that jazz,
you're
like
it's not
that's
something you're
all
never going
way
to deal with
beyond. Cool,
unless
cool.
you want to put yourself into a position where you're going to deal with it, and that's where we're getting into what Ian was talking about is these deeper dives.
Right.
Now, I mean, that being
Okay.
said, if I can go to 100 feet with my open water, 30 meters, and I would be very hesitant to go all the way up from 100 feet really quick. But I mean, I went down there knowing that, and knowing that that's not an option. So I'm mentally prepared that if something happens, I have to ascend slow.
on my deep dive, I was actually low on oil. I was actually about soon to be out of air um, at the safety stop, and so that's why they have the drop tank, and then so you just switch the regulator out and you just hang out. And but that was a 15-minute safety stop at 5 meters, but I was at 30 meters for like a couple of minutes longer than I should be. Um, but also it was part of that exercise of like, okay, we are now going to stay longer because we also have the drop tank. Knowing this, we can do a longer safety stop. Um, and so those that's the timing, I guess, of the more recreational diving that you'd be encountering.
Yeah. So,
Um,
like Ian said, you plan your dive in a way where you don't have to worry about like a long stop. So that dive I was talking about earlier, where I went down that cliff. I went down to 100 feet on that because there were some like really rare coral formations on there we wanted to check out. So we were down there for a couple minutes, and then we ended our dive at like the 20 to 30 foot mark because there was a bunch of stuff we wanted to see there. So we were decompressing, but we were still like looking at stuff and doing things, right?
Cool.
And then we still did our 5 minutes at 20 feet, just as good practice.
Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, if you're concerned, just go with a dive master. If you're renting equipment and renting a boat, they're going to supply a dive master. So there will be someone either in the boat who tells you like where to go and what the time is, or they'll be in the water with you. And for the basic certification, like that's what you're going to be dealing with. So you're fine. It's only if you're like me and have your own equipment and have the ability to do more stuff, that's when you got to start looking after yourself a little bit more. But honestly, even with my own stuff, like 95% of the dives I do are still with a group and with a dive master off a boat or something, right? So
yeah, I guess the one thing is for me is so like, say hypothetically you're a cool kid in Canada and you really want to get into this, right? Like you've mentioned Tobamori, you've mentioned like, well, Ian's coming out to BC and doing some diving, so that'll be cool. Spoiler alert. I assume it'll be cool. But where else? Like what kind of cool diving can you do in Canada if you can't go to like a tropical place, right? Or is that one of those games where if you don't know, I'm not telling you kind of situation?
No. The dive community is usually pretty good about letting people know things because again, it's a small community and they want to maybe expand it a bit, keep the sport going. So, but in Ontario at least, the big thing is wreck diving. Tobermory is a national marine park, and it's that because of the huge quantity of wrecks that are there, and it's really clear water, so it's perfect for it. Also, St. Lawrence is well known for wrecks. So in Ontario at least, wreck diving is going to be the bread and butter of it. West Coast, Ian, you probably have more knowledge about that than I do, seeing as how you're going to be doing it.
Yeah, so I've been doing some research. So none of this is like verified, and it's all anecdotal research of what I could find online. But there are some wreck dives that are deliberately placed in certain outlets of rivers, more notably Campbell River. But there are like kelp forests
there's kelp
and other wildlife that you may be able to see depending on the time of year. And Damian, you don't know how much fun you're missing, and until you go out and do it.
Yeah, I gotta say, like, so yeah, I am a little disappointed about Vancouver, the try a dive thing. But yeah, I will say, like, certainly if I'm given the opportunity to do a tropical scuba dive, I would probably give that a whirl based off of our little chat here.
Yeah.
So good job, guys. My incredible fear of the open water and the ocean and deepness and loneliness and the void and inner darkness slowly consuming me forever is gone.
This just sounds like we need to do like a Caribbean trip of sorts all together and go diving.
Yeah, man, I'm down.
I mean,
Yeah.
word on the street is that's the cheap way to do it, said earlier this video. So just
we could
saying.
do the Damian certification dive, tropical vacation week.
Yeah, just all come. It'll be great.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm down. But I think that about wraps it up for now. I think we've gone for a little while. Hopefully you found it informative. As always, I will say, as I've said already once this video, we are not professionals in this. We are basing all this on our experience and what we've been taught and what we remember from what we were taught. So do not quote us on any of this. If it's something you're interested in, ask a professional, ask a dive master. And if you're interested in getting into the sport, definitely go talk to your local dive shop, see what kind of offers they have. A lot of them have discounts towards the end of the year to try to get new divers in, get your open water certs. So keep your eyes open for that, and yeah, check it out. It's a fantastic sport. So with that, I think we will say thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and we will see you next time. And stay tuned for at least one diving video this year. Hopefully two, Ian.
Ah.
Yeah.
Hopefully two.
We'll see you
Yeah.
then.